All right, welcome back. This is episode 2 in a series of videos about familiarizing yourself with firearms, getting back to the basics so you can handle your gun safely and with confidence. I'm Delta 9 and this is Johnny Tactical. All right, in this video we're going to talk about firearm storage and carrying your firearm. It's going to be mostly discussion here, so feel free to throw your comments down there, email me your questions, and we can address those specifically, but we're going to talk about some general principles. This series, at least to this point, we're just going to talk about, for the most part, handguns, okay? Most of the principles apply the same for rifles, but my example here is a handgun, and so we'll just stick with that, just so we're on the same page. All right, so storing your firearm. So maybe you bought a gun a while back, and you're just like not sure what to do with it, so you kind of just put it away and be like, oh, I'll just leave it alone for now. Storing your firearm is actually, it's a kind of an important thing to think about, because one is, depending on the state and the city you live in, there could be some strange laws, okay? So we're going to talk about very general principles, because you might be in a liberal state with really strict gun laws, or you might be in a conservative state with less strict gun laws, and so you've got to know the laws of your state so that you abide by the law. I am never going to tell you to break the law, whether we agree with them or not. You've got to abide by the law, because at the end of the day, if something were to happen, you could get your goose could be cooked, okay? That's the last thing we want, so we've got to abide by the laws of where we live. And then secondly, we've got to use common sense, right? So when we store our guns, what's the point of, say, for example, locking it up or whatever? Who are we trying to keep it from? So obviously we're going to keep it from children, thieves,
crowbars up,
some people that are incompetent, like maybe they're mentally or deficient or something like that, or they're just not capable, responsible enough of handling it, and then with some mental health condition.
I have problems.
You could live with somebody that is a family member or a friend or a roommate or whatever, and you've got to be responsible with your firearm for their good, right? So you've got to protect them, but you've also got to weigh that in the balance of protecting yourself. But it's got to be reasonably safe for yourself and everybody around you. So maybe you live alone in the woods in the middle of nowhere. So you might store it differently than someone with 4 kids in the inner city of some liberal woke city, okay? You're gonna have different laws. You're gonna have to take different measures. Maybe it's a high crime area with a lot of burglaries. Like the last thing you're gonna want is somebody getting their hands on it that shouldn't get their hands on it, and that's the whole point of storing it properly. So use your common sense, right? You gotta keep it out of the hands of people that shouldn't have it. So whatever you have to do to make sure that happens, do that. Back up a second here and just talk about home and office, right? Like these are like structures. You're inside of a place, not a car. So you've got to follow the laws of your state. And so if you've got small children, make sure it's locked up. Make sure it's out of sight, out of mind. So just like you would not want them to touch a hot stove or run into traffic and get injured, we can still teach them proper gun safety that is age appropriate, so that they know if for whatever reason you had a really bad day and you left it out, or they came across it one day, they're not going to be completely unfamiliar with it and end up getting hurt. So age appropriate education about firearm safety. The same thing goes for my kids. When I'd go to the range or training or whatever, I'd come back and I'd let them watch me clean it and things like that, just to really teach them and reinforce, like, hey, this is like a sharp knife. You can get hurt if you handle it wrong, so you've got to be super careful. What do you do about your car? Like me personally, I do not like the idea of, there are products out there like different like magnets and holsters and things that like attach to your car. So like the gun is always just in the car, like easily accessible. I am not a fan of that. I don't think it's a good idea. I've been a detective for over 8 years, and I can tell you I investigated a lot of cases where people left their guns in their cars and the guns got stolen out of the car. Now, some of them I'm sure were just junk, like false reports because they sold them or traded them for drugs or whatever, but there are legitimately people who, they put their gun in the glove box or under the seat and they think that's fine. But people break into cars all the time. They're not ideal for any kind of long-term storage. Cars are more for like getting from A to B. But I wouldn't leave your gun in there overnight. Like even as a police officer, like our cruisers and stuff, like guns have to be locked up because let's say somebody just breaks the window. I mean, it's just glass. It's not a whole lot between the thief and your gun. So it's got to be locked up in some way, shape, or form in your car. Definitely has to be out of sight. You never want to leave it out or open or any place easily accessible to anybody. Here we go. So we'll talk about carrying a gun, okay? So we'll talk about carrying it on your person, like physically, versus carrying it in like a bag or a purse. We'll talk about carrying it in a holster versus like in your pocket or just shoved in your pants or on like your ankle or something. And I'm only going to talk about, or I'm only going to recommend what I personally do, and because I think that's the only way I can speak with any kind of credibility, because if I tell you to do something that I don't do, like that'd just be disingenuous. So the first time I shot a handgun was when I became a police officer. That was in 2003. And now I've handled guns like a lot since then. Based on my training and my experience, I carry my gun on my person like I carry it when I'm on duty. What that means is I carry it concealed, however, it's in the same place that essentially would be on my gun belt, because my muscle memory my hand is going to go to where I normally carry my gun. So under stress, you're just going to revert to your training. You're going to revert to the habits that you built. So if I carry my gun on my ankle, but 8 hours a day at work, I carry it on my hip. Well, when if I encounter a deadly force situation, I'm under stress, what's going to happen? I'm going to reach for my hip, not for my ankle. Unless you train extensively to like build that secondary muscle memory for you carry it in another place, I would highly recommend that you carry it how you train. So I shoot out of a holster. I learned to shoot out of a holster from day one. And so I carry my gun off duty, plain clothes, concealed, in a holster. I do not recommend just sticking it in a pocket. I know they make like belt clips and pocket holsters and these other things. Like I'm not a fan of those because that's not the way I'm trained. That's not the way I'm comfortable. Maybe you're different. That's up to you. But I highly recommend carrying it in a holster that is specifically made for that make and model of gun. I do not like generic holsters that hold like whatever. The reason is that they can just fall out. So we'll talk about the word retention. You might hear this word like weapon retention or gun retention. And all that means is the holster holds the gun in place. All right, so for example, you know what, we'll review, right? How do you check to see if gun's empty? Lock the slide to the rear. After we point in a safe direction, keep our finger off the trigger guard and outside the trigger along the frame of the gun. If you haven't seen that, just go back to episode 1. We'll cover that for you. Look down the magazine well, breech face, breech. Look away, magazine well, breech face, breech. Now I'm going to just let this go forward. My gun has a hammer, so I have to decock it. So this is a inside the waistband holster. Retention is what keeps the gun in the holster. So if it had a strap, or if it's got some kind of a locking mechanism like this. This is a Kydex and leather holster. It's made by Crossbreed Holsters. And I've had this one for a long time, and so the leather, is pretty worn. So what keeps this gun in here? So if I do it like this, if this were to fall out, like that would be pretty much zero retention, okay? Because if you want a holster for your gun that's specifically made for it so that it keeps it in place. Because if you're running or you fall down, you don't want your gun to just fly out. That's why you need one specifically made for your gun that's got some level of retention. You can do a strap, or there's different type of like hoods and things like that that will hold the gun in place. But you want something that has some amount of retention so that the gun doesn't just fall on the floor and make you look like an idiot and then your gun gets broken or whatever. So choose a holster that's made for your gun and then carry in the way that you train. So don't do anything weird like the shoulder holster or the ankle holster if you never ever shoot like that. That would be stupid, because in the moment you will not rise to the level of your expectations. You will fall to the level of your training. And if you do this and then gun's not there and then you have to go find where you put it on your body, that's costing you valuable seconds, and in life or death situations, seconds matter. So just make sure you carry it where you train. Ladies with purses, I am not I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not a fan. No, I'm not a fan of purses. You see my wife's purse, it's got so much stuff in there. But anyway, no, I'm not a fan of carrying guns in purses or bags, like as a method of carrying it. Number one is, it takes way too long to get it. Number two, if you set it down, well, now you are disconnected from that firearm and you end up in the same position you would be if like a child were climbing around and came across it, or a thief comes around and just snatches it, or you are forgetful and you leave it behind. Like, don't do that. So my personal opinion is you should carry it on your body, and you should carry it on your body where you train with it. So if you carry it in a bag or a purse, you have to be extra diligent to not leave it around and not forget it and leave it behind, and let anybody get into it that shouldn't get into it. Open carry versus concealed carry. That's your call. I carry concealed. Why? Because open carry, like, it draws a lot of attention to yourself. And also, if you were to get in some kind of physical confrontation that is not deadly, well, you've got a gun out that everybody knows about, and that's something that you could then suffer the consequences of having a gun at the fight, and someone takes it from you and then uses it against you. And if they don't know that you have it, that's your first level of retention, in my opinion. Your second level of retention is the design of the holster. So in my opinion, is if you're going to carry, you should carry concealed. I mean, if you like to carry open, that's fine. Like, that's your choice. So I would highly recommend you buy a holster designed for the gun. There's a ton of good ones out there. I'm not going to tell you which ones to buy. I happen to have a crossbreed holster that I've had forever, and I love it. But there are others out there that are just as good. All right. So that is safe storage. Mostly it's common sense, keeping it out of the hands of the people that shouldn't have it, and then carrying on your person the way you train, because when it counts, you will fall to the level of your training. You will not rise to the level of your expectations. That's episode 2 of Firearms Familiarization, getting back to basics. I'm Delta 9, and this is Johnny Tactical. Please like and subscribe if you found this video helpful, and share it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.